Walk past one garden and you will see it laid out like a factory floor. A long block of nothing but tomatoes, then a long block of nothing but cabbage, then a block of beans, each crop standing alone in its own bare patch of dirt, and the bugs moving through each block like a fire through dry grass because they have found a whole field of the one thing they love. Walk past another garden and it hums. Beans climbing up the corn stalks, squash sprawling along the ground beneath them, marigolds and nasturtiums blooming bright among the vegetables, herbs tucked here and there, bees working the flowers, and hardly a pest to be seen. The first gardener will spend his summer spraying and fertilizing and fighting. The second planted his garden so that the plants help each other, and his work is half done before he starts. I am going to show you today how to grow your plants together so they shelter, feed, and protect one another. Companion planting, the old way of the mixed garden, so you spray less, feed less, and harvest more for nothing but a little planning. And the reason this old wisdom faded while the spray shelf grew is that there is no money in a garden that defends and feeds itself. Here is the truth about the lonely single crop row that the garden store would rather not lead with. Growing one crop alone in a bare block is the unnatural thing, and it is the very thing that invites trouble. Out in a meadow, in a forest, in any wild place, plants grow all mixed together, many kinds side by side, and you do not see a meadow wiped out by a single pest, because no pest can find a feast of its one favorite food laid out in a solid block. But plant an acre of nothing but cabbage, and every cabbage moth for miles finds a paradise and breeds, and the plague is on. The single crop row is a banquet set for the pest and a soil drained of one set of nutrients. The mixed garden is confusing to the pest, varied in what it draws from and gives back to the soil, and full of the flowers and habitat that bring in the very insects that eat your pests. Nature grows things together for good reason, and when we grow them together too, the garden begins to defend and feed itself, which is exactly the work the spray and the fertilizer are sold to do. My name is Jacob Stoltzfus. I am Amish, and I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and we have always grown our gardens mixed, the old way. Beans up among the corn, squash running beneath, flowers and herbs set among the vegetables to bring the bees and turn the pests, the heavy feeders following the soil-building beans. We did not learn it from a book. It was handed down, the knowledge of which plants do well together and which do not, the same as our grandparents grew. It is one of the oldest pieces of garden wisdom there is, older than any spray, and one of the most quietly powerful. And I am going to give you the whole of it today. I am going to show you the solid, proven pairings, the ones that truly work and why, starting with the famous three sisters and the beans that feed the soil, the flowers that draw the bees and the pest eaters, the trap crops, and the tall plants that shade the tender ones. I am going to be honest about which companion ideas are sound and which are mostly old folklore without much behind them, because I will not feed you superstition dressed as science, and I am going to tell you which plants actually harm each other and must be kept apart. And there is one thing, one principle underneath the whole craft. That is the real reason a mixed garden has so few pests. And once you grasp it, you can plan your own garden without memorizing a single chart. Stay for that part especially. Here is what you need, and it is the cheapest thing of all, only seeds and a little planning. You need the vegetable seeds you are already going to grow. You need a few packets of flowers and herbs to mix among them. Marigolds, nasturtiums, basil, dill, and the like, all cheap, and many of them things you can save seed from. And you need a little thought about what to plant beside what. Seeds, a few flowers and herbs, and a plan. That is the whole of it. There is nothing to buy that you are not buying anyway, and the planning is free. Let me start with the most famous and the most proven of all, the Three Sisters, the way the native people of this land grew for centuries. You plant corn, and when it is up a little, you plant pole beans. To climb the corn stalks, and squash or pumpkins to sprawl across the ground below, and see how each helps the others. The tall corn gives the beans a living pole to climb, so you need build no trellis. The beans, being a legume, pull nitrogen from the air and feed it into the soil, fertilizing the hungry corn for free. And the big squash leaves sprawl over the ground below, shading out the weeds and keeping the soil cool and moist, while their prickly stems discourage some pests. Three crops in the space of one, each doing a job for the others: the pole, the fertilizer, the living mulch, and together they yield more from that ground than any one of them alone. That is companion planting at its finest, proven over hundreds of years, and you can grow it in a corner of your own garden this summer. Now let me give you the soundest principles, the ones with real substance, beginning with the beans and the soil. The legumes, beans, and peas, have a quiet power. With the help of certain bacteria on their roots, they take nitrogen out of the very air and fix it into the soil, leaving the ground richer in the one nutrient that most garden plants hunger for most. So if you grow your heavy feeders, the corn, the cabbage, the leafy greens, near or after your beans and peas, they feed on that free nitrogen the legumes left behind. This is no folklore. It is the plain reason farmers have rotated and interplanted legumes for as long as there has been farming. Grow beans among and before your hungry crops, and you fertilize your garden out of thin air for nothing. Next, the flowers and herbs, and here is real substance too. A garden with flowers blooming among the vegetables draws in two kinds of helpers. First, the bees and pollinators, without which your squash, your cucumbers, your beans set little fruit. A flower-rich garden is a well-pollinated garden. Second, and just as important, the flowers and aromatic herbs draw in and feed the predator and parasite insects, the ladybugs, the lacewings, the tiny wasps, the hoverflies, that hunt and devour your aphids and caterpillars and other pests. A bare block of vegetables offers these helpers nothing, so they do not come. A garden laced with flowers and herbs is full of them, and they fight your pests for you, free, day and night. Marigolds, nasturtiums, dill, cilantro gone to flower, alyssum, sunflowers, plant them among your vegetables, and you build a standing army of pest eaters and pollinators. This is some of the soundest companion wisdom there is. Now, the aromatic herbs as confusers and repellers, and here I will be careful to separate the sound from the doubtful. Many pests find your vegetables by smell. The cabbage moth smells out the cabbage, the carrot fly smells out the carrot. When you plant strong-smelling herbs among them, basil, dill, sage, mint, thyme, onions, and the like, the strong scents mask and confuse that hunt, making it harder for the pest to find its target in the jumble of smells. There is real substance to this confusing effect, and to the trap crop idea I will come to. What I will be honest about is that the old charts which claim this exact herb perfectly repels that exact bug, plant for plant, are often more folklore than proven fact. Some hold up, and many do not. So do not pin your whole crop on a single claimed repellent pairing. Trust the broad, sound principle. Many smells mixed together confuse the pests that hunt by scent, rather than the precise magic pairing claims, and you will not be led astray. Let me give you the trap crop, which is a clever sound trick. Some pests love one plant so much that you can plant it as a decoy to lure them away from your crop. The classic is the nasturtium, which aphids flock to. Plant nasturtiums at the edge, and the aphids gather on them instead of on your beans and vegetables, and you can deal with them all in one place. The same idea works with other lure plants for other pests. You give the pest a sacrifice so it leaves your harvest alone. And let me give you the tall and short pairing. Tall plants like corn or sunflowers or steak tomatoes cast shade, and you can grow the tender, heat-shy crops. Lettuce, spinach, leafy greens that bolt and turn bitter in full summer sun. In that shade, getting a crop through the heat where they would otherwise fail. Plants of different heights and habits sharing the same ground, each using the space the other does. Not. Now I must be honest about the limits and about plants that harm each other, as I always am. First, companion planting is a great help, but it is not magic. It will not by itself end every pest or replace all your care. It tilts the whole garden in your favor. Fewer pests, richer soil, more pollination, but you will still garden. Second, as I said, be wary of the precise magic pairing charts. Trust the broad principles: diversity, legumes, flowers, trap crops, shade, over plant-for-plant superstition. Third, some plants genuinely do hold each other back and should be kept apart. The old, well-founded warnings are things like keeping beans and peas away from the onion family, which seems to stunt them, and keeping heavy-related crops from crowding one another. And fourth, a real caution. Do not crowd plants so tightly in your enthusiasm for mixing that no air moves between them, because crowding with no airflow breeds disease. Mix your plants, but give them room to breathe. And note that a few companion flowers and plants are not for eating. Grow them for the bees and the bugs, not the table, and keep that clear with children. Help, not magic. Principles, not superstition. Keep the few enemies apart, and do not crowd. Keep to that, and companion planting only ever serves you. Now here is that one principle underneath the whole craft, the real reason a mixed garden has so few pests. And once you have it, you need no chart at all. It is simply this: diversity is the defense. A pest plague needs a concentration of its one host plant to build, a solid block of the one thing it eats, where it can land, feed, breed, and multiply unchecked into a wave. A garden where that one crop is scattered, broken up, mixed among many other plants and smells and flowers, never gives the pest that concentration. The pest lands, but the next plant over is not its food. The smells confuse it. The predators that the flowers brought are waiting, and the plague simply never builds. So you do not need to memorize that basil guards tomatoes, or that this herb repels that beetle. You need only understand that a mixed, diverse, flower-rich garden denies every pest the thing it needs to become a plague. And then mix everything up, scatter your crops, lace in the flowers and herbs and beans, and let that diversity be your defense. That single understanding is the whole heart of it. Let me give you the troubleshooting and the planning. If a pest still swept through, your garden may yet be too much one crop in one block. Break it up more, scatter that crop, mix in more flowers and herbs. If your heavy feeders are pale and starved, grow more beans and peas among and before them to feed the soil, or follow this year's beans with next year's corn in that spot. If your shade-grown greens still bolted, you gave them too little shade. Tuck them closer under the tall crops. If a pairing seemed to do nothing, it may have been one of the folklore pairings, so trust the broad principles instead. And plan with rotation in mind. Do not grow the same crop or its close kin in the same spot year after year, for that, like the single block, lets the pests and diseases of that crop build up in the soil. Move your crops around the garden each year, following the soil-building beans with the hungry feeders, and the whole system grows healthier over time. Let me say a word more about rotation and the years, because companion planting and crop rotation are two halves of one old wisdom. Planting things together helps within a single season. Moving them around helps across the seasons. The pests and diseases that attack a crop often linger in the soil where it grew, waiting for it to return. So by planting that crop in a different bed each year and not bringing it back to the same ground for a few years, you starve those lingering troubles out. Pair that rotation with the mixed planting within each bed and the heavy feeders following the nitrogen-fixing legumes, and you have the whole old system. A garden that fertilizes itself through the legumes, defends itself through diversity, pollinates itself through the flowers, and cleanses itself through rotation. That system fed families for thousands of years with never a bag or a bottle, and it will feed yours. Let me give you a few sound pairings to start with plainly, so you have somewhere to begin. Beans and peas near corn, cabbage and leafy greens to feed them nitrogen. Squash and pumpkins sprawling beneath tall corn to shade the soil and hold the moisture. Lettuce and spinach tucked in the shade of tomatoes, corn, or sunflowers to carry them through the heat. Carrots and onions grown near each other, for each seems to confuse the fly that hunts the other by smell. Basil and other strong herbs among the tomatoes and through the beds to muddle the scent-hunting pests. Marigolds, nasturtiums, dill, and alyssum scattered everywhere to draw the bees and the pest-eating insects and to lure the aphids onto the nasturtiums. And the things to keep apart: beans and peas away from the onion family, which checks their growth. Start with those. Lean on the broad principles for the rest, and watch what does well in your own ground, for your garden will teach you its own best pairings over the years better than any chart can. And let me say plainly that the great gift of this way is that it compounds. The flowers you plant draw the predators, which stay and breed and patrol year after year. The beans you grow feed the soil that feeds next year's crop. The rotation you keep cleanses the ground over the seasons. The diversity you build steadies the whole garden against any one trouble. Each year, the mixed, rotated, flower-rich garden grows more balanced, more alive, more self-defending, asking less of you and giving more. That is the very opposite of the spray and fertilize garden, which grows more dependent every year, the soil deader, the pests more resistant, the bills higher. One way leads toward freedom and the other toward the store, and the old way is the one that leads home. Now, I want to take a moment because this is the part that matters. Think about who profits from your lonely single crop rows. The whole shelf of garden sprays and bagged fertilizers quietly depends on you growing your garden the wrong way. In bare blocks of one crop, which invite the pests, the spray is sold to kill and drain the soil, the fertilizer is sold to feed. There is no money in a garden grown the old mixed way, where the beans fertilize the corn for free, where the flowers bring in the bugs that eat the pests for free, where the diversity itself keeps the plagues from ever building. The single crop row is not how nature grows, and it is not how our grandparents grew. It is how a garden is grown when someone profits from its troubles. They did not give us a better way to garden. They taught us to grow our plants alone and bare, and then sold us, in sprays and bags, the protection and the feeding that the plants would have given each other for nothing. The mixed garden needs neither, and that is exactly why it was let slip from memory. So here is what I want you to do this season. Grow one corner the Three Sisters way, corn with beans to climb it and squash beneath. Tuck marigolds and nasturtiums and a few herbs in among your vegetables instead of in a separate flower bed. Plant some beans near your hungry crops, and break up your big single blocks. Scatter that one crop among others rather than massing it. Do that, and watch the bees come, watch the pests thin, watch the soil where the beans grew feed the corn. Once you see a mixed garden defend itself, you will never plant bare, lonely rows again. Tell me in the comments below. Do you plant things together? And what pairings have worked for you? And did your grandparents grow a mixed garden or the straight single rows? I read every single one of these, and the old ways you all share are the reason I keep doing this. Next time, I am going to show you how this farm plans the whole garden across the years. The crop rotation that follows the soil-building beans with the hungry feeders and keeps the pests and diseases from ever settling in. The natural next step after planting your companions. Until then, mix your plants, grow your beans among the feeders, bring in the flowers, and remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.